بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So this is our fourth lesson on this essay or this lecture by Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, and it is an explanation of Tawheed, the reality of Tawheed which the messengers came with, and refuting some of the doubts which are raised against it. So far in the previous three lessons, we've touched upon many things. We spoke about the fitrah. The fitrah is something which every child is born with, a natural inclination to believe in Allah and to want to worship Allah Azza wa Jal, and that the prophets and messengers, they came and they appealed to this basic inclination, which remains intact in people unless they are taught false things, unless they are taught false ideas, unless they are corrupted in terms of their natural state, their natural beliefs, and so on and so forth. So we said that the prophets and messengers came and they invited people to worship Allah Azza wa Jal alone, and that this is the foundation of rectifying the whole earth. It is the greatest right, the right of Allah Azza wa Jal, and that all the prophets and messengers came with this message. And the first of them was Nuh alayhi salam. And Nuh alayhi salam, he came to a people who exaggerated in their righteous people until they eventually began to worship them many generations later. We said that this manifestation of shirk was one of many different ways in which shaitan misleads people. So in this case with the people of Nuh alayhi salam, he made them exaggerate in the righteous people. To others, he made them worship the stars, the planets, the sun, the moon, making them believe that there are spirits which inhabit these objects and that they somehow influence what happens upon the earth. Others, he made them worship the fire. Others, he made them worship the water, and so on and so forth, in whichever way or whichever reason he misguided them. Also, we established after that we then went into explain Tawheed itself, and that Tawheed, and this was actually the previous lesson that we had, that Tawheed, when we speak of it, there is two aspects to it. The first, which is in relation to knowledge, the fact that we have knowledge that Allah, He is the creator, the provider, the sustainer. We have knowledge of His names and His attributes, and that this knowledge then forces us to worship Him alone. And we gave the analogy, we gave the parallel analogy, which is when, for example, a person knows and has clear knowledge that his parents, his mother and his father, they raised him, they fed him, clothed him, and all of the tremendous benefits that a child receives from the parents. They taught him, they nurtured him. And just the mere knowledge, having that mere knowledge, that factual knowledge, is something that then forces a person to want to be grateful to the parents. So in a similar manner, when we look in the Quran and the argument of the Quran, then we see that Allah Azza wa Jal reminds us that He is the creator, the provider, and the sustainer, and all of the tremendous benefits we enjoy, the benefit of hearing, the benefit of seeing, the benefit of food, drink, the benefit of the animals which are there for transport, for clothing, for food, for drink, and so on and so forth. All of this knowledge, just like in the parable of the similitude of the parents, it forces a person to want to be grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal. And so this is Tawheed, and this is the essential argument in the Quran, that there is no one else besides Allah who is the creator, the provider, the sustainer, who performs these actions of giving, withholding, guiding, misguiding, giving life, taking life, and so on and so forth. So only He has the right to be worshipped. And as for all of the things, stones, trees, prophets, messengers, angels, jinn, whatever else, then they possess none of these qualities independently. Therefore, to worship them is false. And all religion, false religion, is built upon false claims or false notions. And this is the only truth. So after that, after we explained Tawheed, which was the Tawheed of, we said Tawheed of ilm, Tawheed in terms of knowledge, Tawheed fil ma'rifa wal ithbat, the Tawheed of knowledge and affirmation. And then there is the Tawheed of al-qasd, which is the person's intent and the person's irada, what a person seeks, what he seeks to worship. This is what follows on from the first type of Tawheed. So after that, we came, and after we mentioned that these two are binding to each other. So if you affirm one, it is binding that you implement the other, the second, and they cannot be separated. And that this is the basic argument of the Quran. So this is where we finished in the previous lesson. Today, we're going to discuss, the speech is going to revolve around atheism in the first part of the lecture. And this is because the Shaykh, after we finished in the previous lesson at the previous point, the Shaykh now goes on to establish that from everything we've discussed, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah is something that is firmly fixed in a person's fitrah. Right? In other words, our knowledge that Allah is the creator, the provider, the sustainer, and on top of that, that only He deserves to be worshipped. This is something which is established in the fitrah. And you will not find anyone in history, any of the polytheists, any of the pagans, any of those who worship other things besides Allah, whether they worship stones, trees, idols, statues, animals, the angels, the prophets, you will not find anyone amongst them, and it will not be known anyone amongst them that they used to reject Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. In other words, there was no one from the polytheists who denied that Allah is the only creator, provider, sustainer, giver of life, taker of life, and so on and so forth. Right? All the polytheists acknowledged that there is one supreme creator who performs all of these actions, and that He is basically alone in that respect. So no one really denied His existence. So no one denied these attributes for Allah Azza wa Jal. However, there was only one group amongst the pagan Arabs. There used to be some people who used to disbelieve in the resurrection. And they used to say that there is nothing but the passing of time. Only the passing of time is what really causes people to be born and causes people to die. And that's all there is. We will not be resurrected. And this is a process which continues over and over and over. So essentially, this was really like a denial of the hereafter and a denial of a creator as well. And so these were known as the Dahriya, which we can loosely translate as atheists. So in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says about them in Surah Al-Jathiyah, Surah number 45, verse number 24, وَقَالُوا مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا نَمُوتُ وَنَحْيَا وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرِ. They say that there is nothing but the life of this world. So meaning that there's no reality except the life of this world. There's nothing else. And we die and we are born. And nothing destroys us, nothing causes us to perish except time, except the passage of time. And so in response to this, Allah Azza wa Jal, the answer to this was to say, وَمَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِنْ هُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. So the answer to this is that they have no knowledge of this. They don't have any knowledge of this. This is pure, all they do is but speculate. So in other words, these people who were present back in that time, they are present today as well. These are the atheists or the naturalists or the materialists. The naturalists are those who believe there's only just nature. And the materialists are those who believe that reality is just made of just matter and there's nothing beyond the matter that we observe, that we experience, that we play around with, right? The materialists. There's nothing beyond that, right? So they're the same people. So these people, just like they used to say in those times, there's no resurrection, there's no creator. These people say the same thing. Matter is eternal, there is no creator, there is no life after death. So the statements are basically the one and the same. So the answer to them, the Quran, the answer which was given to them, is the answer that we give to these people as well. Because these people, when they say that there is nothing after death, there is no resurrection, there is no other life, and there's nothing beyond this physical universe that we see, all of this is pure speculation. It's pure speculation. And as the Quran says, وَمَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ, they have no knowledge of that. Right? So knowledge, ilm is not the same as speculation. So what they have when they make this denial is not knowledge. And that's what you have to say to these people. When they say, well, I don't believe that there's life after death, I don't believe that we can be resurrected, I don't believe that there's... You have to make clear to them that this is pure speculation on your behalf. You have no knowledge. You've got no knowledge which justifies this position. It is pure speculation and nothing else. And if they say, well, no, it's upon... Obviously, they can't say it's certain knowledge because, you haven't died and you haven't experienced after death, so you've got no direct experience. It's false what you're claiming. So this is the first reality that is given to them, that this is not on the basis of any knowledge. This is pure speculation on your behalf. And you can't upgrade that to the level of certainty and say, well, this is knowledge. It's pure speculation. So after this, after mentioning that this is pure speculation, then the Shaykh then goes on to outline some of the evidences in the Quran which speak against the atheists. And so the first of those arguments and the first of those texts in the Quran to which they have no answer is the passage in Surah At-Tur, which is the 52nd surah. And in this passage, Allah Azza wa Jal asks a number of questions. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ أَمْ خَلَقُوا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بَلْ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. So here now there are a number of scenarios, a number of questions which are posed. And so the text of the ayah is as follows, roughly in English. Were they created, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ, were they created by nothing? As in, without an agent, without a creator. Were they created by nothing? Or were they themselves the creators? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? Right, so there are three scenarios presented here. Were they created by nothing? In other words, were they created by nothing, nothing at all, just popped into existence? Or did they self-create? Were they the creators? Did they create themselves? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? And at the end, بَلْ لَا يُوقِنُونَ, rather they have no certainty. They have no certainty in these affairs. So basically, when we analyze this, what has been mentioned here in these passages or in this text, then a number of situations which obviously cannot be denied. So the first is that the knowledge that a person did not create himself is self-evident. Right? This is self-evident knowledge. Like when you say to someone, "Did you create yourself?" It's a question that doesn't even need an answer because it's a self-evident truth. Right, so here in this ayah, am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in. The first part is, were you created by nothing? This is a self-evident truth. Right, the answer, there is no answer. So similar to if we were to take, for example, a cup or any object and say, did it create itself? Well, it's a self-evident truth that it didn't create itself. And likewise, the same applies to any other being, whether it is living or non-living. Did it create itself? We know that the answer is a self-evident truth. No, you didn't create yourself. But anyway, the first question is, were they created by nothing? Right? And the second part is, did they create themselves? So it's really two ways of saying the same thing. So if you have a cup, for example, and you ask the question, did nothing create the cup? Or you ask the question, did the cup create itself? Self-create. It's two ways of essentially saying the same thing. So in both instances, the answer is no. Right? The cup didn't create itself. It wasn't created by nothing, and nor did it create itself. And in fact, as the scholars explain, each of these three questions, you move from something that's impossible, and it becomes even more impossible as we go on. Right? So nothing creating something being created by nothing is impossible. And then it's even more impossible for something to create itself, because then it has to come into existence by or from nothing and then create it. This is even more absurd. And then when you go to the third question, did they create the heavens and the earth? That's an even bigger impossibility. So as you go further along these questions, then we are talking about greater impossibilities. So anyway, when we analyze this verse, we basically come to the following realizations. First of all, that the knowledge that man did not create the universe is a self-evident truth. Right? It's not under dispute or debate, so that's out. The knowledge that the universe didn't create itself, like man didn't create himself and the universe didn't create itself, that's a self-evident truth as well. Right? These are self-evident truths which are not really deniable. So these questions, the answer to them is something that's already natural and clear and apparent to everybody. Right? No one can deny the answers to these questions. So basically, on the basis of these questions, there are only three possibilities that exist. Only three possibilities. And they are as follows. Either nothing created something else. So in other words, nothing created this table, nothing created the phone, nothing created you as a human, nothing created, the plant or the tree, or nothing created the systems of cause and effect which are behind life, right? So the sun and the air and the light and the soil and the DNA and whatever else, the biological systems, nothing created them. So nothing created something else. That's the first possibility. Nothing created something else. The second possibility is something created itself. Right? So am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in is the first one. Nothing created something. Am humul khaliqun, or were they themselves the creators? This is now the second possibility, that something creates itself. Self-creation. Creation by nothing or self-creation. These are the first two options which you can resort to in order to explain life. So as you know, the first two possibilities are impossible. No one is going to claim the first two possibilities unless he is a liar or unless he has lost his mind. He is a fool. The third possibility is that something created something else. There has to be something which created the something else. And obviously, this is the only answer that can be given. Something had to create something. So we've eliminated the first two. There's no such thing as creation by nothing. There's no such thing as self-creation. This doesn't exist. So the only thing that can exist, which is the third possibility, something created something else. And everybody has to agree upon this. that something created something else. So from here now, what is the actual dispute between us and the atheist? What's the dispute now? Because we agreed that there has to be something that created something else. From here, there are only two options. There are only two options after this point, right? And so when we look at the creation, when we observe everything in the creation, whether we do it at just the basic observation level, we see the sun, we see the moon, we see the stars, we see the rain, we see the plants, we see how everything works together in such a way that it allows life, it allows so many benefits. And, and so every person is able to make this observation, right? This is how the Quran makes the argument. The argument is such that it uses only the most apparent of signs which every individual can see and observe. So in other words, the Quran is not going to point to something which only a scientist in a lab is going to be able to analyze and see, and which some guy in a jungle somewhere doesn't have the ability and the means to look at. Right? The Quran appeals to every single person in accordance with what he or she is able to witness with the senses directly without any hindrance. And that's why the Quran is the hujjah against every person, irrespective of their level of intelligence and whatever means and tools they have at their disposal. So basically, if we now reflect just at that basic level, at the top, the very basic level, or if we go right down deep to the level where the people do have that intricate knowledge of the creation of biological life, of matter, of forces, or whatever else, and they look deep, when we speak about the cell, the biology of the cell, the DNA, and whatever else. At every level of observation, what becomes evident is that there is knowledge behind this creation. Right? The attribute of knowledge is something which is very obvious and apparent. Because what do we see? We see there are wisdoms and goals in everything. Right? If you just reflect even just on the human body, which is something that Ibn al-Qayyim, he discusses in one of his books, Miftah Dari Sa'ada, that when you look at the human body, you find that everything is in the absolute right location for everything. Whether we look physically at the structure of the hands, whether you look at the organs internally, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, everything does something very specific to it, and it's in just a perfect place, right? So whichever part of the creation you look at, whether it's the human being, whether it's a plant, whether it's the bodies, the sun and the moon, how they move and behave, you can see that there are goals and wisdoms behind them. In other words, there are objectives that they fulfill. This means that whoever created that, or what we can see from that, is there are objectives in creation. Objectives. Right? So if you write these attributes down, there's ilm, right? So when you reflect upon the creation, what do you see? You see clearly there's ilm. Right? When you look at a cell and you understand that the DNA, the gene, is basically like a database. It is like, an Oracle or MySQL or MSQL. This is the analogy which the scientists give, that the DNA is basically a database. And when you have the RNA, which is the copy of the DNA, this is basically like RAM. It is short-term memory, RAM. Right? The computer, when it operates, it's basically the RAM, which is the working memory. So it makes a copy of the data and it loads it into short-term memory, and it allows the running of the software. And then you have machinery within the cell, and that machinery is basically it's operating a lot like software to run different functions, to replicate, repair, copy, transmit, and so on and so forth. And so this analogy that I'm giving you is that actual analogy that is now being given in the research papers, because before this they didn't have the ability to study the cell in this manner. And with the development of computer science from the 40s, 50s, 60s, they've now, and also discovery of DNA and so forth, they're now speaking of the operations in the cell exactly as you would, in the language of computer science. So the point being that no matter what you look at, clearly from this you can see there are a number of things that clearly evidently stick out from this. Number one, there has to be the attribute of knowledge, ilm. This is clearly knowledge. Secondly, there has to be the attribute of wisdom, hikmah. And hikmah, here we mean that clearly things have been put there for a wisdom and a reason and a purpose. Right? So there is clearly hikmah in the creation. And there is clearly qudra. Qudra is purely the ability and the power. Qudra, the ability and the power. And also there is irada. Irada meaning will. So the very fact that we see plants and flowers of different types, different colors, yet we see they all come from a seed. And in that seed, what's the difference between all these seeds? The only difference is the knowledge content in that seed, basically in the DNA, right? But the water is the same. The same water feeds the same seed, but that seed turns out some flowers are yellow, some flowers are red, some flowers are whatever else. This is an evidence that there is irada, that there is a will behind this, because we see this variation, right? Even though the seed, the actual seed looks the same, is the same type, but there's some knowledge content in those seeds that varies, that leads to the different colors. That means that there is irada. We clearly see that there is irada in the creation. Likewise, the different colors of human beings, some are black, some are white, some are red, some are brown, some are yellow, like the general complexion, right? This comes back down to genetic factors, so it means that there's some. So the point being from this, we now clearly see that there's irada as well. So we've now established, purely from just observation and reason, that there are 4 attributes. There could be others, but these are the 4 main attributes that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullahi alludes to. So the point being that just by observation upon the creation, we can see that there are clearly evident attributes which stare us in the face, right? So the first stage of the argument here then with the atheists, remember we've denied that nothing creates something. We've denied that something created itself. So we've only got the third possibility, something created something else, right? So what we're doing now is we're looking at how can we get knowledge of what that something is. How do we acquire knowledge about what that something is? And this is what we are saying now, that when we have to reflect upon the thing that's been created. And from that we can clearly see that there are attributes that stick out, obviously, glaringly, which we can pick out. So to make this very, very clear, I always give an analogy or an example. I will give the example of this microphone. And so, first of all, did nothing create this microphone? Obviously not. Did the microphone self-create? Obviously not. So those 2 ridiculous answers are out of the window. Did something create the microphone? The answer is obviously yes. Right? Just the mere existence of this microphone in itself is evidence of the thing or the being or the agent which created the microphone. This is a self-evident truth, right? So in a similar manner, just the existence of the heavens and the earth, that in itself is a direct proof of a creator. Simple as that. From this point onwards, how do we acquire knowledge about the one who created this microphone, right? So there are a number of things that just by reflection we can clearly see. First of all, there has to be knowledge, because this person understands knowledge of sound waves, the use of electricity, the use of manufacturing, metals, plastics, whatever else, transistors and so on and so forth. So ilm is a given. Secondly, there has to be wisdom, al-hikmah, wisdom, because the person who made this microphone clearly had a reason or a purpose behind it. It is to amplify a person's voice, right? So there's clearly a wisdom and clearly an objective. This is clearly what we see. So hikmah is another attribute. Thirdly, just having the physical capacity or the ability to manufacture indicates qudra, which is power and ability, qudra. And finally, al-irada, which is will. The mere fact that the person, when we look at this, we have like choice, we have, the microphone could have been this width or that length, or it could have been, there's different ways. We see that the person definitely had a will and a choice in how he made this microphone, right? So now we've clearly established that from the thing that's made, from the thing that's created, we've established a number of attributes that must belong to the someone or the something that created it. Is that clear? Right? So from this, we know that the something that made it exists. From reflection upon it, we know that there are certain attributes that must belong to the something or the someone that made it. And that is knowledge, will, power, and wisdom. Right? So all this up until now cannot be denied by anybody. Even the atheist can't deny this. Now, if the atheist comes and says, well, no, I'm sorry, I don't believe there are wisdoms in creation. There is no greater liar on the face of this earth than this man. Right? You might as well just deny your vision. You might as well just deny that and say that, well, actually, vision and hearing does not even exist. Because for you to claim that there are no wisdoms and end goals in creation, and the fact that that something is there for something else, meaning if you study anything, if you study, for example, the digestive cycle in the body, you'll find that there's some chemical reactions cascade into other chemical reactions, and then it's all tied and connected together, right? So there are millions upon millions upon millions of wisdoms in creation, and by that we mean causes and effects, which then lead into something else, and that something else feeds into something else, and that feeds into something else, and it's all tied and connected, right? So how can nature just somehow magically know, put all of this together to work? There has to be irada, there has to be hikmah, there has to be a predefined, there has to be knowledge that already knows beforehand that this is going to lead into this, and that's going to lead into that, and that's going to lead into this. It has to be. Similar to this. That the person who, the wire, person already knew that the wire has to go here for it to connect to the power mains. And the person already knew that the actual thing, the film, what you call it, the thing that it has to be here. Right? So the fact that you can't deny there's wisdom behind this, otherwise you're denying your very senses. You're denying that you have vision and hearing and common sense and intellect. Right? So to deny, this is what the atheists will say. They will say, no, everything is just random. Everything is just nonsense. It's nonsense. So up until this point, what we are saying then is that we've established these attributes which cannot be denied, and anyone who denies these attributes clearly can be deduced from the creation is someone who denies intellect, denies that he has vision, denies that he has hearing, and denies that he has common sense or a heart with which to think and reflect. It's a denial of sensory perception outright. You might as well just say that we are blind, deaf, dumb, or whatever else. So you can't go there either. So now then, the whole argument now then is, where do we put these attributes? Where do we put these attributes? Who do they belong to? And as you and I know, attributes cannot exist on their own. Right? Attributes can only exist in a being. So this knowledge, irada, this will, this wisdom, this hikmah, and this power, qudra, then there's only two options. The first one is the common sense, rational, intuitive, the obvious answer, which is they belong to a being who is outside of the heavens and the earth, and that is the creator of the heavens and the earth. Right? You have to put these attributes somewhere. They belong to Allah Azza wa Jal, and He is the creator of the heavens and the earth. This is the common sense, this is the only rational explanation. Right? Similarly, if I was to say, these attributes that we've got from this microphone, knowledge, wisdom, irada, qudra, where should we put these attributes? Well, they belong to the individual or the group of individuals or the company that manufactured this microphone. right? By necessity, it has to be so. That knowledge, they possess that knowledge. That irada, they have that irada. So this is obvious. So that's one option, and that's the truth, that's the haqq which cannot be denied. The only other option is the option that the atheist is forced to go into. And this option is basically to take those attributes and to put them back into the very thing that was made and manufactured. Right? So basically, the knowledge is in the microphone, and the will is in the microphone, and the power is in the microphone, and the wisdom, meaning that the various objectives and the reasons for which it was created, they lie in the microphone itself. That's the only other thing you can do. Why? Because you can't put the attributes anywhere else. Attributes cannot exist on their own. Do you understand that? Like, for example, if I said wisdom, you can only think of wisdom existing in a person. You can't think of it, you can't see wisdom walking down the street. Attributes only exist in other things, right? So you haven't got any third option. Either you put these attributes into a being, or you put the attributes back into the thing that's actually made itself, right? This is what the atheists are basically doing, right? So when they deny Allah the Creator, they have to put these attributes back into something, right? So these attributes go back into nature, right? So where's all this knowledge now about the cell, biology, DNA, database systems, whatever else? Where does that knowledge actually lie? Where does it exist? Oh, it's just in nature, because nature self-creates, self-organizes. That's what they're really doing. Do you understand? So you have to. The very important thing to understand is that these people use extremely deceptive, technical, cryptical, scientific language to hide the fact, or to hide what is on a very simple level, something very basic. That's what they're doing. They're trying to they're trying to prevent you from realizing what they're actually doing. And what they're doing is exactly what I've just said. Right? So it's as simple as this. If you have a cup or a mug, and it didn't self-create, it wasn't created by nothing, rather it created itself, and all of the attributes are within the mug itself. The knowledge, the wisdom, the irada, whatever else, everything is contained in the mug itself. All of this is just to deny that someone actually made it. That's what they're doing. Right? That's the actual intellect. That's the level of aql that they basically have. But to hide this stupidity and foolishness, they bring all of this detailed, technical, cryptical language to basically hide it from you, right? To make you think this is something like scientific or whatever else. So let me give you one example. When they say natural selection as part of evolution, right? This is how they play with words. If you look at the word selection, selection means to choose between one of two things. To choose between one of two things, to purposefully choose. Right? So really what they're saying is nature is what selects. Right? So nature is what automatically knows how to lead things towards end goals. But then on the other hand they say, well, nature is just totally blind and purposeless and random. It doesn't have any goals that it works to. Right? So what they do is they hide these meanings into the words that they use to basically just confuse people. Anyway, that's a whole, I don't want to go into that, that's a whole different topic. But anyway, all we need to understand is that all the complicated language these people use, when it's reduced back down to the very simple basics, this is basically what they are doing to you, right? And as for all of the individual things that they are speaking about when they speak about cosmology or the Big Bang or all the individual particles and forces, these are just the minute details that they engross you in to prevent you from realizing the very simple trick that they are pulling in order to justify the atheism and the naturalism, right? So when you get caught in discussion of all of this other stuff, that's just a diversion to make you think that there's some, scientific backing to the idea that something can create itself or self-organize itself. That's all they're doing there. But on a very basic level, that is what the atheism is actually built in. It is to take the attributes that belong to Allah Azza wa Jal and to put them back into the creation, and then to bring about speculative ideas, and then to define them in scientific terms to hide that fact. That's all it is, nothing else. So it's as simple as that and nothing else. So this verse that the Shaykh brings, that's just like a brief commentary upon the verse itself. And then the Shaykh goes on to bring some other ayat. Before we go on, I know this is can be quite a heavy topic. If there's any questions on anything that I've said, I'll stop right here and give you a chance in case there was something that wasn't clear or needs further elaboration. Okay, labas. So we'll continue then. Once all of this is clear, then we should understand that the atheists purely have speculation, nothing else, when they claim that there is no creation, resurrection, and creator afterlife. All of this is pure speculation. And as for what they use to justify their atheism, then it is basically they are committing shirk, in the sense that they are giving the qualities and attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal to nature itself. So the atheists are actually mushriks. Atheists are mushriks. They commit shirk in the sense that they take the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal and they ascribe them to nature, to His own creation. And that's what they're really doing. Right? So the ilm of Allah, the qudra of Allah, the hikmah of Allah, the irada of Allah, all of this is somehow self-contained within creation, and nature self-creates, self-organizes, and so on and so forth. That's basically what they are doing. So you don't need to be intelligent, you don't need to have detailed knowledge of science or cosmology or whatever else. When they come to you, you just give the general answer. Right? Because not everybody knows in detail all these things. They'll come and they try and bamboozle you. Oh, well, we know this now. Stop there. We tell them straight, this is what you're doing. Right? These attributes which we can clearly see from what we observe, from the wonders in the creation, all you're doing is you're taking them and you, instead of giving them to Allah, the Creator, which is the obvious default truth, you're just putting them back deceptively back into creation and then hiding it with, clever, deceptive, cryptic knowledge. That's all you're doing. That's all I need to know. Even though I might not know the specifics about this thing that you're bringing, but I know this in general, that's what you're doing. That's all you got to say. So from that, then let's move on. The Shaykh then brings on some other ayat in the Quran. هَذَا خَلْقُ اللَّهِ. This is the creation of Allah. فَأَرُونِي مَاذَا خَلَقَ الَّذِينَ مِن دُونِهِ. Then show me what have those who are besides Him, what have they created? So this now is another rational or an argument against these people. So you say, for example, and this is like a whole topic in itself as well. So let's look at this ayah. You say this is the creation of Allah. So an atheist comes to you and you say, well, I don't believe in a creator, I don't believe in a God, I think it's all fantasy. So all you have to do is, for example, let's take a fly, or let's take a leaf, or let's take even a brain, for example. So you say to these people, well, this is the creation of Allah. Show me what have the deities besides Allah, what have they created? Right? So whether it's a fly or a leaf or a brain, for example, the way the brain functions, show me what of those besides Him, what have they created? So obviously the best thing that an atheist can bring is whatever technology exists that is present that they've managed to create at the moment, right? So if you do the research, you'll find that the scientists are trying to mimic like a robotic fly, right? And where they're trying to program the fly to respond to something that comes towards it and to move, right? So they're building all these drones to mimic flies, right? Or they are trying to mimic the function of the brain by developing super chips and whatever else. And in fact, if you go to the website aboutatheism.net, right, I've put some articles on there which touch upon these developments. So the point being, as soon as an atheist tries to point out the existence of these types of things, straight away the argument is finished. Because the people who are creating these things, they can only create these things through knowledge, will, wisdom, and power. Right? So if this insect thing that you're creating, you only created it with tremendous amount of knowledge and wisdom and will and power, and that's how you created this thing, right? This in itself is a direct proof that the fly or the brain or the leaf, whatever else, it has a creator. This cannot be denied. And there's actually a field of science now, there's a new field of science, it's called biomimicry. You can just go and Google it, biomimicry. All it means is copying biology, right? It's a whole field in science. And so what they're doing is they're looking at systems in biology and looking at them, analyzing them, and then replicating them and applying them in technology, in medicine, in all sorts of different things. So this is clear evidence that there is knowledge, wisdom, will, power behind the things that you're studying. Right? Because if the things that you're replicating require knowledge, wisdom, will, and power, then by default, the original thing that you're mimicking, that itself must have knowledge, will, wisdom, and power. There's no other way about it. And you see these people, how they are so arrogant in that they praise themselves for their achievements, that we've now managed to mimic the function of the brain after spending tens of billions and billions of dollars and research and whatever else, and the brains of all of, and so they are happy to praise themselves. And as for where they took it from, like the actual brain or whatever they're mimicking from biology, all of that is just the product of random, chance and whatever else. It's just ridiculous. So here, when we see هذا خلق الله, this is the creation of Allah. فأروني, so show me ماذا خلق الذين من دونه. Show me what have those who are besides him, what have they created. So this again is another argument. They have no answer to this. Because the argument falls against them. And similarly, another ayah, Surah Al-Ahqaf, Surah 46, verse number 4. قُلْ أَرَأَيْتُمْ مَا تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَرُونِي مَاذَا خَلَقُوا مِنَ الْأَرْضِ أَمْ لَهُمْ شِرْكٌ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ. A similar ayah. Say, do you see what you call upon besides Allah? Show me what have they created of the earth, or do they have any share in the heavens? So, anyway, these are some ayat which should give us a general idea about the futility of the atheist position. It is pure conjecture and nothing else. The science is just used as a mask. And as for the science, the actual empirical science through which we get physical, tangible, beneficial things, that does not support the conjecture, right? So the fact that aeroplanes fly, the fact that we have, advanced medicine, the fact that we have all types of industrial machinery, all of this, these are just ways and means that we are studying, which we are benefiting from, right? That itself does not give any support to your conjectures and speculations about the origin of the universe and the origin of man. Those are pure speculations, right? So the argument about science and industry and technology and whatever else, that doesn't hold, because the two things are not really related. These are just things, material causes and effects that we are studying, we're analyzing, we're manipulating to develop, technology, industry, and to facilitate life and whatever else, right? This is all from Allah's creation. That's got nothing, and it doesn't support in any way the conjectures that you have, your speculations and your ramblings about how the universe started and about how man originated, right? There's no connection between these two. So don't go to try to use the science thing, because it doesn't hold. So these are just pure speculations. As we said, the atheist position is pure speculation, and all it is is taking these attributes which are very clear and apparent and throwing them back upon nature itself. So in essence, what they are then really is these are nature worshippers. That's what they are. And there's something that I say, which is, if you look at the early primitive nature worshippers, like the mushriks of old, they would look at the creation and they would be in awe, for example, of a mountain or of lightning or whatever else, and then they would attribute power to these things. They would attribute divine attributes to these natural phenomena and then begin to worship them, right? So what they are doing? They are giving divine attributes to created things, to natural phenomena, and then they are being consistent and they are then worshipping them, right? Right. This is due to their deficiency in intellect, right? So these are the old primitives. The modern day atheists are basically the same. They're primitives as well. What they are doing is, but they're a slightly different angle. What they're doing is, they are giving nature divine attributes so as to avoid having to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? So that's the difference between those and these people. They're basically doing the same thing. Both groups are giving divine attributes to nature. The atheist is doing that. Self-creation, knowledge, wisdom, it's all self-contained within nature. Nature creates. Nature self-organizes. Right? And likewise, the primitive of the past, you know, there's power and there's whatever, control over life, death, giving this to nature. So both are doing the same thing, giving nature divine attributes. But one is being consistent and then worshipping nature, which are like the polytheists of the past, whereas these people are doing it shrewdly, cunningly, in order to avoid having to worship the Creator. Right? So they give divine attributes to nature, and so they don't have to worship a creator because they've removed a creator out of the picture altogether. Why? Because they've taken his attributes and thrown them upon nature and saying he doesn't exist. Right? So they've done it out of arrogance, whereas these people did it because out of, you know, simple-mindedness or out of whatever reasons, false reasons they gave in order to worship nature. So that's all they are. They are nature worshippers and nothing else. An atheist is a nature worshipper. He worships nature and he gives nature these qualities and then tries to deny it by using very deceptive, technical, cryptical language. That's all there is to it. Now the reason why we spent all this time is because atheism, you know, is on the rise, and unfortunately, even in some of the Muslim countries, you see now in the Arab countries, in Pakistan and other places, there are movements and pockets of atheism. And these people are basically, they are deceived by the conjectures, you know, the Big Bang, evolution, and they haven't been able to see, and because this is taught in the universities and whatever else, and they don't realize, they don't realize that these are discredited. Like if you look at the actual science right now, the Big Bang is false. It can't be sustained any longer. And that's because they took a wrong path 100 years ago and went in the wrong direction. Again, this is all technical, I don't want to spend too much detail. In order to explain how the universe is why it is, they had to choose a particular force, and they happened to choose gravity. Because they chose gravity, they could only go in a particular direction, right? And rather than admitting that it's false, they've been inventing particles, forces, whatever else over the decades, up until the point they've come to a point now, they've realized this cosmology is actually dead. Either we continue going and deceiving ourselves in this path, or we stop and just say that we were totally wrong. So that's why you'll see now there's thousands of scientists who reject the Big Bang and say it is categorically false and cannot be supported by the evidence. And all these people are doing is they're just inventing things to keep the whole idea patched up, right? So Now this knowledge won't filter through to the university or the college or the textbook, right? So the average person who's doing science, he'll continue to be told, well, this is the what science is established now, that there was a Big Bang and there was this or whatever, and this is totally false, right? So many of these people who are taught these things in the Muslim countries, they believe them to be actual truths, and on that basis they are led into atheism. Similarly with evolution, what they don't tell you right now is evolution. There's a big debate and argument. They know that the whole natural selection mechanism and random mutations, this is totally false, this is unworkable. And now there's 3 groups that are split amongst the evolutionists, right? The first of them are those who are basically sticking to that old idea, even though it's false. So we'll call these the fundamentalists, the extremists, right? Or like Richard Dawkins and these kind of people. They're sticking to the idea, yes, this is it. But that's categorically false, it can't be sustained anymore. Then you got another group who's basically saying, we have to scrap that altogether, and we have to find some new mechanism and put it on the table, and we should all collaborate together to develop some new idea for how the evolution really works. That's the second group. And there's a third group who's saying, well, okay, we're not going to outright reject this one or that one. We'll try and come to a compromise and merge the 2 ideas together. And that's why you see these people now speaking about the third way of evolution, right? So all these things which are taking place in the field, this is not going to filter through to the actual textbook that a person is being taught in GCSE biology or in the university or in the college. It's not going to happen, right? They're not going to know that these are actual controversies which are taking place at the highest level, and that there's a fundamental shift taking place in the whole field of evolution itself, or even in cosmology itself. Nobody gets really taught that. So, and you have to, keep that in mind. So because of that, in these Arab countries, in these Muslim lands, a lot of people, they're falling prey to the ideas of the atheists, and they're becoming apostates and disbelievers. And so obviously this, as Allah Azza wa Jal says, He brings the living out of the dead and the dead out of the living. And so one of the meanings that the scholars give, this obviously applies in a physical sense, that the earth is revived and comes back to life, and then it, but also in terms of the hearts as well. There are some hearts, they are given life, meaning that Iman enters into their hearts. And there are other hearts which are made to die, that Iman is taken out of their hearts. So this is something, Allah guides whom He wills and misguides whom He wills. But, and I think it's important to address this issue, and especially for the children who will experience and be exposed to these types of ideas. If their fitrah is not protected and made intact as they grow, as they develop, then they'll be prone to these kind of ideas and these kind of shubahat. So it's important that we nurture the children to understand these basic elementary truths which are self-evident. Because without that, then they will be prone to these kind of shubuhat and these kind of ideas. Anyway, we'll conclude at this stage, and we'll continue, inshallah ta'ala, in the next lesson. So we'll take off from this point, from the point of atheism and naturalism. We'll take off from this point, inshallah. We'll develop the discussion in the next lesson. And with that, we'll close today's lesson. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. If there are any questions, we'll stop if there's any questions, if there's something not clear or...
So is that a fifth lesson? Was it like before from the fifth lesson now?
Yeah, there's more. We're only halfway through yet. Tomorrow there's loads of yes. Taking longer than I expected, so there'll be probably a good few more lessons here. Okay, we'll conclude there, and we'll continue inshallah next week, same time.